right, again, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining NCDEQ for our presentation this morning on the DERA program. I'm Stephen Rice, Environmental Specialist for the Division of Air Quality, and I'm joined by additional DEQ staff who manage other aspects of Volkswagen settlement and other grant opportunities such as DERA. We have a few housekeeping rules before we get started. All attendees will be muted during today's webinar. Questions can be submitted in the Q&A box and will be addressed during the question and answer time if not covered in today's presentation. The raise hand feature will be disabled until the question and answer time and will only be considered for those who have called in to the webinar by phone. For those who are calling in today, pressing *3 will raise your hand and pressing *3 again will lower your hand. All other attendees must use the Q&A box to submit their questions. Also, please do not direct questions to specific panelists. Make sure you're submitting questions to the general Q&A list. Today's recording will be made available on our DAQ DERA webpage at a later date. And we do have a good amount of time to discuss the program, the application process, the RFP, and other aspects of DERA. But if we complete everything and answer all questions with time to spare, we do have the option to adjourn early. On the flip side, if we're not able to answer all questions by the end of our time, we will certainly let you know how to get your questions to us. So right now I will turn it over to Sheila Blanchard, who will be giving today's presentation. Again, Q&A will be at the end of today's presentation. And Sheila, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to put my face on the screen for just a minute so you can see who I am. My name is Sheila Blanchard. I'm an environmental program consultant for the Division of Air Quality, and I manage some of the grants for the Volkswagen as well as the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act grants, mobile source emission grants through our division. So I'm your point person for answering questions about this grant program. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to disappear now and start the presentation. What to expect today? One thing to expect today is that this presentation will be posted on our division website. This mobile source emissions reduction grant will lead you to the DERA landing page, which has all of the information that you will need and see after today, including a portal to our grant management system. It'll have links to our RFP. There are example applications. There are past grant recipients and grant profiles, and really everything that you need to know about these grants you can find on these page. And once you download this presentation, we'll post it a little bit in a few days. You go into presentation mode and all the links will be active, and you can follow through that presentation and get to some of these pages that I've linked through this presentation. Today I'm going to give you an overview of the mobile source reduction grants from DERA, which I'll refer to them, their Diesel Emissions Reduction Act program. We're going to go over when and how to submit your application. We're going to go over application evaluation and scoring, and then we're going to give you some information on where, some places on where to find information after this workshop, and then we'll try and answer some of your questions should you have them. First things first, this grant program is a reimbursement program. It is for diesel equipment upgrades or replacement. This means you have to have an engine or a vehicle that takes diesel that fits into the parameters of the program that you would like to replace. The point of this program is to generally move older, aging diesel equipment off of the road to increase the air quality for North Carolinians. So that is the primary purpose of this grant program. An important thing to know is that there are mandatory cost shares for almost all project types. There aren't a ton of 100% funding level for this program, but there are some for some kind of for upgrades. But for the most part, you will be expected to have to pay for some of the replacement equipment that you would get. So you have to have that money up front. And then once the project is done, you will make a claim in our GMS for reimbursement. So that's an important component of this program. The other thing to know is that when you do replace diesel equipment, you must scrap that old equipment. And scrapped is a very specific definition that's that we have from the EPA. This is an EPA. This program comes down from the Diesel Emission Reduction Act. We manage it for the state of North Carolina. A big part of that program is that you have to scrap that equipment, and you have to scrap it within 3 months. This is because you're not able to increase your fleet. And if you have a new piece of equipment and an old piece of equipment on the road at the same time, you're really expanding your fleet, and you're not allowed to do that. So within 3 months, you take delivery of new equipment. If you do not scrap that equipment within 3 months, you run the risk of not getting a reimbursement when you put in a claim. And then just an overview of the request for proposals. The request for proposal opened in September 12th of this month. It will close on November 14th. That's 60 days to submit your application. We will do our evaluations around December, and then we'll try and do some notifications in January. We don't usually have a huge applicant pool for these programs, so we try and get through these evaluations fairly quickly and get to notifications and contracts fairly quickly. We hope to have the contracts processed in the spring, early spring of next year. And this is an important date for this particular grant.
Sheila,
Yes.
we're not seeing the slides. All we see
You're
is
not
the main
seeing-
slide. Yeah, we don't see the presentation mode slides.
Really?
Yeah. You may need to switch your screens again.
How about now?
Don't see anything yet.
Help us on. Okay, let's try this again.
There you go.
Okay. All right, so just because you didn't see the first slide, once again, reimbursement program, mandatory cost shares, scrapping the diesel equipment, and scrapping the replaced equipment within 3 months. I'm sorry about that, folks. Okay, let's go back to our timeline. So the RFP opened early this month on September 12th. It's going to close November 14th. We'll do our evaluations in December. We hope to make some announcements in January. We want to process those contracts in early spring. This is an important date. This September 30th is when all work must be completed. So if you have, this is a fairly short deadline. We do work with some extensions if necessary because we are aware of the continued supply chains that are happening right now. But this is the ideal target deadline for when you need to have the work completed and have the certificate, engine, destruction, the scrappage, and your final reports to DAQ. This year we have quite a large amount of funds available. We have over 1.0 million in anticipated available funds. And that's a good amount of funds to get a lot of projects done for this time. Who can apply? Any private or public sector entity stationed in North Carolina is eligible to apply. This link right here will link you to the past DAQ grant awardees page. This will tell you or show you some of the projects that we funded in the past through our grants. Like I said, it is generally a replacement program, but we've done all kinds of stuff. We've done lawnmowers, we've done school buses, we've got some transit buses, we've done marine engines, things like that. So really, if it takes diesel, if it has a diesel engine, it is likely eligible under this program for replacement or for upgrades, which includes retrofits like diesel, like SCR and things like that to increase the quality of the emissions coming out of an engine. This is a description of the vehicle and engine types that are eligible. We'll go into a little bit more of that, but like I said, if it takes diesel, it's likely that we can replace it under this program. Here are the funding levels. They're different depending on the kind of replacement and the kind of project. You'll see that engine replacements or vehicle replacements have different cost share levels. You'll see that zero tailpipe emission power source, which would include something like a battery electric replacement or a hydrogen, which we don't really see that much of here. Those have lower cost shares for you, and DERA will pay a little bit more for those. So how you read this is the DERA funding limits. This is how much we will pay. DERA will pay towards the costs of these projects. And then the minimum mandatory cost share, the fleet owner contribution, is what you would have to pay to complete these projects to the program. Like I said, there's lots of eligible equipment. This is a boat that we replaced, or an engine that we replaced last year on a boat. We've done a lot of school buses. We've done some transit buses. We've done some refuse haulers and certain kinds of trucks. I did build what we're calling a DERA eligibility tool. This is on our webpage, and you can access it through this link. And if we have time a little bit later, I might show you that. It's essentially a series of questions in a form that you can answer that will allow you to figure out whether or not, one, your vehicle or equipment is eligible under this grant, and two, what your potential cost share might be to complete a project under this grant. So I urge you, if you this isn't the end all and be all for eligibility, but it will get you started and give you a good idea on whether or not you can and should submit a project. Some important criteria that's true of all of the projects that we do under the DERA grant. The replacement vehicle and equipment must be of the same weight class of the original vehicle and equipment. This is essentially a like for like replacement project. We want to get, because we're taking emissions off the road, we want to make sure that we're replacing with cleaner equipment that is replacing that old equipment of the same weight class. So it really needs to be able to do the same duty cycle as the old equipment. Another thing that's important is that all replaced equipment must have 3 years of useful life remaining. This is 3 years from the award period of active, complete duty cycle time that replaced equipment must have. This is important because we're trying to mitigate the NOx or the emissions that would have been on the road in that 3 years with newer, cleaner equipment. Another thing is that the original equipment must have been operational. We're not going to replace anything that is sitting because it's not able to be fixed or anything like that. The equipment must have been operated at least 70% in North Carolina, and then it must be operated at least 70% in North Carolina for the next 5 years after the replacement. So you can't get this grant and then move away to another state and get those air quality benefits for Virginians or anything like that. We want those air quality benefits to stay here in the state of North Carolina. Other things, if you are doing an on-road vehicle, it has to be class 5 trucks or larger, and these are diesel powered. We don't replace any other equipment besides diesel. If you are looking to increase your horsepower, you cannot increase the horsepower for non-road equipment for more than 25%. So once again, we're at that like for like. The equipment that we replace must be similar to the equipment that you buy. The on-road vehicles must get at least 7,000 miles per year of annual mileage or more. Agricultural pumps need at least 250 hours per year or more. And other non-road engines must operate over 500 hours per year or more. And the marine and the locomotive criteria is a little bit different. If you visit that eligibility tool, it will walk you through those various projects as well. And if you have questions about other types of equipment, please feel free to send them our way. Scrappage. Scrappage is really important. It's to get that old equipment off of the road. This means essentially to render the equipment inoperable. It will never burn diesel again. You're allowed to recycle it. And what this means is usually a 3-inch hole in the engine block for all engines. Scrappage also means disabling the chassis, which is cutting the vehicle's frame rails completely in half. This usually happens at the scrapyard unless you want to tow a vehicle. And then once again, you have to scrap all replaced equipment within 3 months of taking delivery of new equipment. We've got some pictures of what scrappage looks like. This is the hole that is rendered in the engine block. As you can see, that will never be able to combust diesel again. And then we have the frame rails that are cut in half of our of some aging equipment here. And so at the bottom, you would take pictures of the before the hole and before the chassis rails are cut, and then you would take pictures after, and that would be a part of a claim to get your reimbursement for the new equipment. All right, so we're going to move. That's the overview of the DERA grant program. It does. Having a lot of technical difficulties. I don't know how to help that. Just give me 1 minute. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, let's hope the volume is a little bit better on these. Thank you for your patience. All right, let's move into the how to apply section of the presentation. This is a multi-step process. It will take some time for you to apply. You will not be able to log in on November 14th and complete an application. It's impossible. You will miss the deadline. So please listen very carefully to the next steps so that you may submit an application, not just an application on time, but an application in a time where we can work with you and get that application correct and ready for evaluation. The first thing you must do is have an NCID, which is used to request access to our grants management system. The next thing you have to do is submit an access form to the grants management system, which is linked here, this Enterprise Business Services External Access Request application. We're going to go through a little bit of this, and then you're going to complete and submit a substitute W-9 and send it to this email address. Once you receive a welcome to the DAQ Enterprise Business System, you will be able to apply for this grant in our EBS portal. Once again, this could take up to 1 week to get all of these steps to apply. So I urge you to go ahead and already start the NCID process. If you work for the state or if you work for another organization that uses an NCID, you will not have to do this. You can use your NCID that that you already have to submit access requests to our GMS. Okay, so first things first, this is how you would get an NCID. You would go to this web page, https://ncid.nc.gov. You're going to go to this register link. It's going to ask you to complete some forms, some inputs in a form. You're going to want to set up an individual NCID. This is even if you're a business. This is even if you work for a business. This is your individual NCID that you will use. We also have an set of instructions here if you would like something a little bit more in depth in this. So the first thing you do is you go and you register. And then it will ask you for a username and a password, and then those are going to be the same credentials that you will use to get into our GMS. There are some acceptable NCID formats. If you do not follow this format, you may be denied to get access. The most common one is your first name, and then your initial, and then your last name, or your first initial or your second initial and your last name. And then if those things happen to be in use, you can use a number. An example would be W.E. Coyote would be an example of an NCID, or Wiley E. Coyote. Whatever permutation of this would become your NCID. And please, when you set up your NCID, write it down or try and remember it, because that's what you're going to be using for all of your applications in the future. It will be what you're using for our GMS to manage your grant should you receive one, and to submit your claims. So it's something that you're going to have for a while, so make sure you remember it. Do not make your NCID a company or organization name. Remember, this is a personal NCID. This is for you as an individual. Therefore, it should be associated with your information and something you can remember. Once you get this NCID, you'll complete and submit the External Business Services Request application. And this is an example of the web form. It's actually online. You would fill in these parts of the web form. The agency is going to be the Division of Air Quality, because this is the agency that we use. This is our agency, my agency, that we are using for our grant management system. You will put in your first name, your last name, your organization name, your address. And remember, this organization address is the legal address of the organization or the entity that you are applying on behalf of. This should be where the funds and the money would go to, where your tax address is. So this is really important that this stays consistent through all of the paperwork that you submit to us. So once you get through that, you select a role, you will be able to submit claims, submit an application, that's what that is. And then there's a CAPTCHA to make sure that you're a real person that you would submit. And once you submit this, you will move to the W-9 form, and I'll show you a picture of that after this. One thing is, for each organization that you affiliate with, and this organization name and this address, you're allowed up to 3 users for that one organization. So if it's you and somebody else filling out a grant, working on a grant application, you can both do that and work on the same application. Just make sure that this organization name and this metadata for your organization is the same for the folks that are applying to get access to the management system. Once you get access, you will receive a welcome email, and then you will be able to log into the GMS, and it'll give you a link to that login to the GMS at that point. The general deadline for requesting access to get an application in before the closing of this RFP is October 31st. It is possible that you may get access before that, but we cannot guarantee that you can get access if you submit this paperwork and all this stuff anytime after October 31st. This is the North Carolina Substitute W-9 form. This is a different form than the federal form, so keep that in mind. You're going to want to put in this information that's relevant to how you're using this program. Legal name, everything, and asterisk is required. The address, the legal address will be for the entity or the organization that you are applying for. Once you get that welcome email, this is the portal that you will be linked to, this Enterprise Business Services. This is the landing page to get into the grant management system. The grant management system is where you will apply, where we'll process agreements, where you'll upload all your paperwork, where you'll submit your claims. It's really the one-stop shop for the application and the grant process for any of these DERA grants, for these Volkswagen grants, for all of these things. We did build a help manual for the grant management system that's linked here. We also have a page that gives a lot of information as well as some webinars about using the grant management system and things like that. So there's quite a bit of resources here that you can use in order to navigate the system. So once you get your NCID, that's your username and your password, you'll be able to log on, you'll get into the grant management system. So once you're in the grant management system, this is what it's going to look like. As you can see, it's welcoming my supervisor, Brian Phillips. It's going to welcome you to the grant management system. One thing I wanted to show you is that one of the resources we have here also for getting information about how to navigate the system is our Daq Training Library. This goes through a systems of modules, including how to submit an application, how to view an application, how to submit a claim, how to edit a claim, things like that, that may be helpful in your application process, as well as should you receive a grant in your grant process. The first thing you're going to do to submit an application, you're going to go to Create New Application. Go to that link. It's going to lead you to a search page. I usually just push search. What you're going to do when you push search, it's going to bring up all of the open grant programs that you could submit an application for. So go to search. And it's going to bring up right now I opened this a few days and did a picture of this. And so it looks like we've got 4 grant programs open right now. And you're going to go, the one that we're looking for here is the diesel emission reduction grant. And this is essentially number 15. And then you're going to go to this link right here, DAQ grant application DERA. And this is going to lead you to the application where you start filling in your information for your grant. And that's what this looks like. As you can see here, this is the first page, which tells us who you are, what your project title is, what your project type is, how many vehicles or what kind of equipment you'd like to replace. These drop downs will lead you to the kinds of projects that are available. If you wanted to do a exhaust after upgrade or retrofit, you'll be able to pick that. If you want to do a vehicle replacement, you'll be able to pick that. So this is where you describe what kind of project you're doing. And your address, remember, this is the address. Okay, so this is the address of the project. So wherever that vehicle and that duty cycle will be, because this is where we're looking for those emissions benefits. Up here, you can see the tabs. So these are the 5 tabs that you will complete in order to have a complete application. This is the project metadata. So this is the first step. If you can come down here and press check, if everything's not filled out, it's not going to let you move to the next, it'll let you move to the next page, but it'll tell you that there's something missing, and then you'll have to fill that in before you can move to the next tab. The next tab is the contact information. We are asking for authorized representative, which is who legally can sign the paperwork for these grants. We're asking for a project manager. In general, the project manager is the person that I will be contacting to get information from. They're the manager of the project. They're the person that's going to be our point person that's going to get all of the emails, going to have to do all the reporting, things like that. So this person is the person that's going to that's really going to manage the project as well as the grant manage the project from the grant management system aspect. And then we're asking for a financial contact. This is usually just the financial person, the person that can sign on the dotted line for the money. Once again, there's a check. If you haven't filled all of this out, you will get an error, and you'll be asked to fill it out before you can save and close or submit. We're moving to the budget. The budget is how much the project is going to cost here, and it fills out all of this adds up for you. This project total is going to be how much it costs to do the project. It's going to ask for the equipment and the vehicle and engine project total, and then infrastructure if that's something you're asking for. We do provide infrastructure funds for electric replacement projects, so that's where you will put that in. And then we have requested funds, which is how much you're asking from the grant. It's not going to let you fill in more than what you can request under the cost shares of the program. So you'll fill out the requested funds. The matching funds is going to be how much you have to pay in that mandatory cost share that's required to do the project. Other funding, there's not a ton of other funding that really can come from DERA. If you think you have something for that, I guess let me know. This could be private funding, something like that. And then if you do fill out something for other funding, this is where you specify who and where that comes from. All right, so now we're in the project details. This is asking you to give us a narrative or a description of the project. So honestly, you could probably skip number 2 and just put in anything there because that's sort of a hold off from the Volkswagen. But we want to know the proposed project, where it will happen, what kind of vehicles you like to replace, things like that. It's really just the specifics of your project. We have some questions about emissions reductions. Is this the first replacement that you're doing to move to an alternative fuel, et cetera, et cetera? What are some other things that your organization or your company are doing to decrease emissions in your company, in your area, things like that? We're asking for, in question 4, we're asking for co-benefits, sensitive populations. Does your refuse truck go in the mornings where there are school children waiting outside? Things like that. Do you transport elderly people? Anything that really that can tell us about the people or the environment that this project would serve. And then finally, number 5, project feasibility. We need to know that you can do this project. If you have done a grant before, or you've done any kind of EPA grants before, or if you just have the procurement experience and the technical experience, we want to know that here. This is where you show us that you can do the project. And then we have a space for any additional information to evaluate the project. Once we do the emissions quantifications for the various replacement projects, we do look at these to kind of take a look at some of the more qualifiable information about projects that goes to our selection committee. Once you've filled all this out, you can do a check, and it will check everything that you filled out before. If you need some time, you can also save and close and come back to it. And then you press next, and it's going to take you to the certification. This is where you sign and you say everything I've put in this application is absolutely true. And things like that. And then you put in your title. It will fill in your date. If everything is complete, the submit button will be highlighted. It'll allow you to submit, and you will have submitted your application. Once you've submitted your application, you cannot edit it. Okay, so if you're not ready to completely submit your application, you can save and close, and you can come back to it at a later date. Once again, the check button will allow you to check all the data and all the information to make sure you have all the required fields filled in. So this is the screen of what you get when you save the application. This tells you your application has been saved successfully. This is your application ID. You might want to write this down. This will allow you to get back to your application should you need to. And then we have one thing about our grant management system, you can always upload attachments at any of these screens at any of these times in various ways. This is one place where you can upload attachments. You could, and we have a link of the checklist of attachments that are required, and I'm going to go over a little bit of what that is in a moment. So if you wanted to upload your spreadsheet that describes your fleet that you would like to replace, you could do that here. You just go to choose file. It will make you navigate your file system. It will give what the file you've chosen or highlighted here, and then you can attach, and it will attach to your application. And I'll show you where that attaches in a moment. So once again, so we can come back to this actually in a moment. This is how you can do the attachment in the application. So I'll move back to that in a minute. There are a few attachments that are required for this application. So if you are wanting to apply by the deadline, these are some of the things you should start working on now. You'll want to start working on these before you get in the GMS. One thing that is required is our DEQ vehicle spreadsheet. This is a description of the vehicles or equipment that you would like to replace, and then it has a column for what you would like to replace it with. I'm going to show you a picture of that. You should have a quote for any equipment that you would like to buy, any repowering, anything like that. You need to have an idea of what things are going to cost in order to fill out that budget. So we ask for a quote for the work. If you did want to do infrastructure, we ask for itemized quotes for any of the infrastructure as well. And usually this includes an equipment and an installation quote. So quotes should really include everything that you will need to complete the project. We need pictures of engine tags of what you would like to replace. We need pictures of those VINs, and we need pictures of the original equipment or vehicle. This is because people use different words for different kinds of vehicles, and sometimes, you know, as they say, a picture says 1,000 words. It's just helpful for us to be able to tell that a steer loader is a steer loader if somebody is using a different word for that piece of equipment. So this allows us to be able to quantify or qualify what kind of equipment you would like to replace. And then any other supporting documentation for your application. This could include a membership into a women-owned business organization or a minority-owned business organization, or supporting documentation from your council of governments or something like that that supports your project. So these are all kinds of attachments that you would attach to your application to make a complete application. At the very least, you will need the spreadsheet, you will need the quotes, you will need the pictures of the engine tags and the pictures of the equipment. Whew. All right, so this is our spreadsheet for the equipment to be replaced. Up top here is in blue. As you can see, we ask for the vehicle make and model. We ask for the engine make and model. We ask for the vehicle weight. We ask for how much fuel you'll use, the idling hours, your mileage, et cetera, et cetera. This is so we can run the emissions quantification on the replaced vehicle. On the bottom columns here, we ask for the replacement vehicle. So you may not know all of this. You may not know the specific model or the model year. The model year must be the year of the award or 1 year prior. So by this point, it will be 22, 23, or you may replace with a 24 are the available replacement vehicles that you could buy. You will know, hopefully, if you have a quote, you will know the costs of the repower, you'll know the funds that you're requesting, et cetera, to fill out the bottom portion of this spreadsheet. So this is one of the attachments that you will have to add for your fleet description in order to have a complete application. And I want to point out here, the first sheet on the spreadsheet is for on-road requests. The second sheet is for off-road requests, and so instead of idling hours or annual mileage, it has hours, because most off-road equipment uses different kinds of ways to measure duty cycle. So the off-road request is slightly different, but is there to for you to put in your off-road equipment descriptions. So let's say you've got an application started in the GMS and you're not quite ready to submit it. You want to confer with a colleague about your essays and what you're saying. So you want to go back in and you haven't submitted it. You want to edit the existing application. When you go in, it's going to show you your application that you started if you push search, but that's not really what you want to do. What you want to do is go into edit application. It's going to ask you for your application ID. You can put that number that was there before when you saved it. You can do *853 and that'll give you the star of everything before that and then the last things. Or you could just push search and it's going to put up any applications that you've been working on. And then you can go into that application. It should say in process. If it says submitted, you will not be able to edit it. It should say in process. You'll go to this application and it'll take you right back to the application that you started. Okay, so once you've got that application up to snuff, you think you've got everything in it. You may not have submitted all your attachments yet, but that's okay. If all of this stuff, if all the project, the contact, the budget, the project details, and the certification are all correct, you can now submit that application. And I'll say it again. You will not be able to edit that application once you submit it. However, on our side, if we see that something is off, we will return it to you. We'll send it back to you. We'll tell you why we returned it. And then you will go through and do that edit application and correct the things that we've asked you to correct. And then you will resubmit that application in the GMS. Okay, we do allow 10 days after an initial submission to get the application up to snuff. We don't get usually we don't get 100% correct applications on the first try, but usually after a few goes, we get it correct. So you submit that application and it's going to come to us and we'll check it out. You'll get a different screen. You're going to get that your application has been submitted successfully. This application ID of your application. You can do your attachments checklist here. We've linked our checklist of what you need to attach. You can do your attachments here, just go through the file and attach everything. Or you can go back here in the application where it says view application, or even edit application or create application. You can do it at any time, and you can push this attachment and it will give you a choose attachment. It will take you to your file FTP, and then you look for your file and it'll say kind of attachment, and then you'll push attach and it'll attach it there too. And you'll see it attached here in this attachments menu. Once you have attached everything, you can go into view application and you will be able to see all of your attachments as you've attached. You'll see attachments that I've attached to under this attachments heading in the view or create applications bar. So once again, once you've submitted, you can view your application through the View Application form or button here. Once again, you can search, it'll take you to your application. Here you can see it says submitted. Once it's in that submitted state, you cannot edit, but you can add attachments. And we're seeing this again. You can add your attachments to your submitted application. You can add it here, choose files. You can add it here and upload. And so that's really everything that you might need to know to submit an application in our GMS. We tried to make it easy, but we do know that some people do have some issues. If you have some issues with the application itself, what to upload, how to fill out the forms, you would call us. If you have problems with the GMS, the actual platform, you're going to have to call somebody else, and I think I have that number somewhere else for you, and they will be able to help you actually get into the platform. So there are some things to know about this application process. I've said this before, this is not to increase fleet size. You cannot apply to get a new truck if you do not have one that you want to destroy. And you must have owned that truck for 2 years, and that truck must be doing the duty cycle that you apply for, so that 10,000 miles that you're applying for in that county that you put in the spreadsheet. Once again, the replacement vehicle must be like for like. You can replace a Class 8 with a Class 8. You can replace a Class 5 with a Class 5. You can replace a mower with a mower that has the same horsepower, etc., etc. Your budget information should really be as accurate as possible. When we do make awards, we make awards based on that budget information. So keep that in mind. We have done partial funding before. We have funded parts of projects, 1 vehicle out of a fleet of 10. So keep that in mind. We will fund the highest scoring vehicles usually, or highest scoring equipment. The essays, a lot of people shrug off essays, but if we do have some projects that score similarly, or if your project is particularly special or interesting, this is where you tell us. And this is how we can further evaluate those projects that may tell us something besides the emissions benefits of such a replacement project. Every project has a story, and this is where you tell it. So fill out those forms, fill out those essays, or those short answers to tell us what makes your project special. Okay, we will not accept late applications to the grant management system. We will not accept emailed applications. Once that grant management system application closes, it is closed. If it is not submitted at 11:59 on November 14th, 2022, it will not be in the pool of consideration for this funding cycle. Do not wait to the last minute. Okay, so don't sign any agreements with vendors. Don't start work until your contract, if you get an award, until the contract is fully executed. If we get an application that we think could be funded under another program, we may share that application to get funding, because there are similar funding through DERA, through other agencies, through some of our municipalities. So we may share your application in order to spread the funding out. So that's a possibility for your applications. And another thing is you must use your NCID or your GMS periodically, or your account will be made inactive and you'll have to request access again. So if you're waiting for us to get to you about an award, just you can log in and check the status of the application, and just do that every little while, so you won't be made inactive. And once again, an award, once we put out awards, that is not a fully executed contract. The executed contract comes a few months later after we've done the paperwork and it's gone through our business folks and it's been There's some other steps for that, and then an executed contract will come via email. It'll be signed by all parties, and then that's when you can begin work. So let's talk a little bit about the scoring criteria. I get this question a lot. The most important thing in our scoring criteria are those emissions reductions. This is an emissions reduction grant program. So the DEQ outputs the diesel emissions quantifier, which is the tool that we use to gauge emissions from these projects and was specifically created for the DERA program. It will give us some output of your project. So by far, the highest, the most points come from emissions reductions for that project. And then the cost effectiveness, which is based on the amount of money that we're paying to do that project for those emissions reductions. So this is a large proportion of those points. So that is probably the most important criteria when we score these projects. The other thing we look at are co-benefits. This might include other emissions reductions, which could include carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases, and some of the other things, PM 2.5 for some projects. We have an environmental justice score, which is based on the county that this equipment operates in, and that's a set score that was devised by our environmental justice team in tandem with our environmental justice team. The EPA does designate priority counties, so you get 5 points for each of these that you may be in. So these priority counties are designated because they tend to be high emissions burden counties. They tend to have a lot of emissions associated in their, various roadways and things like that. So those priority counties are Cabarrus, Gaston, Iredell, Lincoln, Mecklenburg, Rowan, and Union. You'll get 5 points if your project is taking place in that county. 5 points for historically under-resourced county. I'm going to show a map of where those are. Those are designated under-resourced counties that have historically not received grants through either our VW or DERA programs. There's 5 points for an electrification project. So they're, in keeping with the governor's ideas about electrification of heavy duty equipment. And then there's 5 points for minority women owned business, for a total of 115 points for each of the projects that are submitted. We will score these and then we'll send them to a selection committee, which is typically made up of people outside of the DERA, any DERA folks, and then they will allocate the amount of funding based on the scores of those projects as they see fit. Environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. This is a part of DEQ stewardship to increase environmental justice awareness, as well as to decrease the burden of historically environmental justice communities. So there's some points for that. We have the historically under-resourced county map. These are the counties in this map that would receive those bonus 5 points. And as I said, these were determined based on environmental justice, as well as some historical economic tiers that are developed by our Commerce Department that we consider historically under-resourced. This is a list of the counties in case you're curious. And finally, if you are not on our mailing list and you would like to receive email updates about the DERA program, this is an annual program. This happens every year, hopefully, depending on whether the funds have been allocated by Congress. So you can apply multiple years. You can it will be back. Please send the word subscribe to this DAQ email address, and you will receive all of the up-to-date information about everything that's going on with this grant program, as well as some other stuff that our division is doing in this year and in years to come. A few helpful hints as we embark on our questions. Apply early. I can't say this enough. The sooner you apply, the sooner I can help you with your application. The sooner we can figure out how to, if we need to make your application more competitive, if we need more information. Apply as soon as you can. Try and get into the GMS as soon as you can if you haven't already started that process and you think you're, even if you think you're going to apply and you don't know for sure, I would go ahead and get started on that. That November 4th closing date is going to come quick, I guarantee you. And the sooner that we can get started on some of these applications and I can get started working with you, the sooner the better. Once again, if that application comes in at 12:01 on November 15th, it will not be accepted, and I hate to do that. Finally, please contact us for questions. If you have questions before the application closes, if you have questions after the application closes, contact us anytime. But if you specifically need help with your application, once again, the sooner the better. You can email if you don't feel like getting on the phone, or if you don't feel like emailing me, Sheila Blanchard, directly. You can send an email to that DAQ and mobile source DAQ grants email. I usually answer those within a few hours, you know. And I'll send you some information, the relevant information to answer those questions. We do have, once again, this GMS external user manual to help you navigate the GMS. Hopefully this overview has given you a little bit more of an idea. We tried to make it easier, but we can help you with that. But this user manual is there and it goes through really all the steps for applying, for viewing applications, for submitting claims, for uploading attachments, things like that. Finally, if you are getting specific, what I would say technical difficulty questions about the GMS, if you're having troubles with your NCID, say your NCID may be expired, or you're going to want to call EBS support. These are the folks that run the platform, the actual GMS platform. So those are the folks that's our support desk for some of those things. If you get some error message, sometimes you can get an error message and you just have to close out and then start it up again in your browser. That can happen. But if you're having continuous issues with the platform itself, you're going to want to contact EBS support, and they're fairly responsive. They'll get back to you pretty quickly. And this is our screen. These are our program contacts. I'm your lovely host, Sheila Blanchard. I run the DERA program here for the Division of Air Quality in the state of North Carolina. We have Matthew Hoskins on the line. He's going to be reading our questions. He's my second commander, and then we have Brian Phillips, who's the supervisor. Generally, all of us can answer your questions. If I happen to be out, you can always contact Matthew or Brian, and they'd be glad to answer your questions. And I think that's it. I think we can open up the floor. I realize I went through this very quickly. So if you have questions, I think now is the time to type them into the chat, so we can start to address some of those. Yeah, and I'm just going to leave the contact screen up for your reference. And I guess, Matthew, we can start answering some questions.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to be doing the Q&A for this DERA program webinar. Currently, we don't have any questions in the log, so if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in and we'll read them out. So we've got our first one. Will we receive a submission checklist similar to the Volkswagen grants?
As far as the application checklist, we do have one that does come up when you put in your application that has a what you need to upload checklist. Additionally, there's also one in the RFP on page, I forget what page it is, but there is a checklist for all the things you need to, yeah, it's on page 9 of the RFP for all the things that you need to apply, which is a vehicle equipment spreadsheet, a quote for all the vehicles and engines, pictures of all the equipment, and supporting documentation. if you get all of that stuff uploaded, that's your checklist. And there's also one on our landing page for the supporting documentation needed for an application. If you're asking about a checklist for something else, just specify in the chat.
All right, we have another question. This one's from Kelsey Smart. She's with Turtle Trash. She's asking for the 2-year requirement. When is that 2 years calculated? When the grant would be awarded in 2023 or when the grant application is submitted in 2022?
If you're talking about for the new vehicle procurement, I believe the actual language is within 1 year of the upgrade activity. So as far as if you're buying new equipment, if you get the grant in 2023, you could procure 2022 equipment or 2023 equipment. So it would be the year prior to the receipt of the award. If that's what you're asking, if you're asking about the procurement of the year of the new equipment.
And Sheila, she specified for the vehicle that they are replacing.
I'm not sure what's.
With regards to it being in operation for the previous 2 years.
I see. That the vehicle should be in operation for 2 years prior to award. So it should be 2 years right now. And then once you get an award, if you do, it should be operational from 2 years prior to accepting the award.
All right, we have another question. Given the short time frame between likely award and contracting and the end of September, will a purchase order be issued after the grant application date be allowed, or do we have to wait until after the agreement is signed before we issue a PO?
You are going to have to wait until after the grant is signed to issue a PO. That would be considered work on the grant. And yeah, so you would have to wait until a fully executed contract in order to do that.
Another question, is there a frequently asked questions document?
Good question. I don't believe we have one for under the DERA landing page. There is one for Volkswagen that is somewhat applicable to this program as well. And there is certainly one on the EPA page about some of the programs, but we don't have one currently, as far as I know. And Brian, if you're on, you can let me know. But as of this point, we don't have an FAQs page set up for DERA.
All right. We have a question. How is the 3 years of remaining life determined?
Okay, so there's a few ways that you can determine that. You can determine that looking at the total mileage of the vehicle and then dividing by the annual mileage and the kind of regular fleet years that you would get out of a vehicle. So if you have 100,000 miles on a vehicle and you get 25,000 miles a year, you might have 3 or 4 years left on that vehicle. Depending on how old it is. We can accept fleet records, but one thing that this new DERA cycle has is a written some kind of testimony by the fleet owner and manager that that vehicle does indeed have at least 3 years of life left in it. So if you know that you retire all of your fleet vehicles at 25 years, then that may be very high depending on your vehicle, or it may be very low depending on if it's a locomotive. Then you have records that show that you would keep that vehicle in service and resell it at some point or scrap it at some point. So those are the kinds of things that we look for. We really leave this up to the fleet owner to be they know their fleet, they know when they retire things. I will say that if we do get a vehicle or an engine or some kind of equipment that is excessively, that somebody is claiming excessive useful life, we'll flag that and we'll generally put in our own data for those kinds of inputs. But 3 years is the very least for the DERA program of what can be expected for useful life for anything submitted.
So we have a question here about the infrastructure. We mentioned that the infrastructure for electric replacements may be funded. So the question is this limited to infrastructure related to installation and electrical interconnection, or can other things, such as an irrigation system upgrade for an electric agricultural pump, qualify as well?
Nope. Electric infrastructure is just for the electric vehicle. DERA is pretty clear. It's a lot of, it's like everything in front of the service panel. So really none of those other things are eligible. There are some specific things that can be funded, and if you have some specific questions, but really it's the installation and the equipment for something that charges an electric vehicle is really all that can be claimed on this one.
That is all the questions we have for now. We'll give you a moment. If you have any other questions, go ahead and put those up in the chat. It looks like that may be it. Sheila, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time today. It looks like you're going to get 45 minutes back on your schedule. Please reach out if you have any questions about what we've talked about today. I'm going to give it one more second. We're going to go once, going twice. Okay, and with that, I bid you all an adieu, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.